My phone rang while I was working in the Hotel Business Center in Berlin. I was reviewing my keynote slides 3 days before I was set to speak at the European Property Management Conference. The line crackled, and I could hear my son's breathless voice through the receiver. "Mom, it's happening. Vanessa's in labor." I felt a wave of warmth spread through me at the sound of his voice, an excitement I hadn't realized I had until now. "Right now we're at the hospital," he continued. "They're saying, 'A few more hours, you have a granddaughter coming, Mom.'" The words hit me hard, and my chest tightened in a way that I hadn't felt in years, not since my husband had passed away. A granddaughter. I glanced at the screen of my laptop, the conference, the contract, the crowd of 200. I looked out the window at the skyline of Berlin, the city I was still learning to love despite its coldness. "Don't you have that conference thing, Christopher?" I asked, my mind still stuck between the excitement of becoming a grandmother and the reality of my commitments. "I know, but you're the keynote speaker, right? That's a big deal. Just come after. She'll still be here." I sighed, looking at the words on my screen. The organizer's plans, the deal I had signed. "I'll be there as soon as I can. 4 days at most. Tell Vanessa I'm coming. She'll be glad." He hung up. I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone. A granddaughter. It felt surreal. For years, it had just been my son and me, my husband gone, my life slowly changing as I became more distant from my roots in Greenwich, Connecticut. Christopher and Vanessa lived in their large family home in a quiet, affluent neighborhood. It wasn't the same for me anymore. I'd been in London, managing my late husband's properties, returning to Connecticut maybe once a year, but now it was different. Now I had a granddaughter. I was going to be a grandmother, and I wasn't going to be the kind of grandmother who only showed up in stories. I'd be there. 3 days later, I gave my keynote speech, left Berlin in a rush, and flew back to the States. I landed at JFK, rented a car, and drove up I-95 to Greenwich. It wasn't a long drive, but it felt like the longest I'd ever taken. Along the way, I stopped at a boutique in Westport, buying a silver rattle, a cashmere blanket, and a stuffed lamb. It was probably too much, but I didn't care. This was my granddaughter. I could feel my heart racing in a way it hadn't for years. I had this vision of what this moment would be, what she would look like, how she would feel in my arms. I had waited for this. I couldn't wait to see her. Their house stood on Round Hill Road behind thick maples, perfect hedges framing the white colonial. I could see the place in my mind. I'd been here so many times before. It hadn't changed, but now everything felt new. I pulled into the circular drive just past noon. As I walked toward the door, the excitement bubbling inside me made every step feel heavy and light at once. Christopher answered before I could knock. He looked wrong, exhausted, his face drawn, not the look of a new father. "Mom," he said, stepping aside, but not enough for me to come in. "Let me see her. Where is she?" I asked, almost breathless. The room was too still, too quiet. He stepped back, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite place. The way he looked at me, like there was something he wasn't telling me. "Come in," he said. "We need to talk first." I was confused, thrown off balance. "What do you mean?" But I didn't ask again. Vanessa appeared behind him, wearing white linen, her face pale and smooth, but not tired. There were no traces of a newborn spit up on her shoulder, no sign of exhaustion. "Hello, Nancy," she said flatly, not the greeting I had imagined, not at all. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice a little too sharp. They walked me into the formal living room. It was the kind of room you didn't use when you had children or babies. Antique settee, Vanessa's grandmother's portrait on the wall. Not the family room, with its soft, warm furniture where you would hold an infant close and get lost in the quiet comfort of her smallness. I stayed standing, my feet heavy. "Where's the baby?" I repeated, my heart pounding. Christopher sat down, his hands twisting in his lap. Vanessa sat beside him, her posture tight, her fingers folded. "Sit down, Mom," Christopher said softly. "I didn't want to sit. I wanted to meet my granddaughter." Vanessa's voice broke the silence. "We placed her for adoption," she said. I stared at her. My mind refused to process the words. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Christopher sighed, his voice quiet. "The baby, we gave her up. It's already done." I set the gift bag on the floor. The house felt so still. There was no crying, no baby sounds anywhere. "You called me 4 days ago," I said, my voice shaking. "From the hospital. You told me you were having a daughter." We did have a daughter, and we made the best decision for our family. I stood there frozen, in shock. I couldn't understand. "Where is she?" I asked again, my voice desperate. Christopher finally looked up. "She's with an agency. They'll place her when they find the right family." "Tell me which agency. I'll go get her right now." Vanessa shook her head. "It's a closed adoption. We don't have to disclose that information." I could feel my world shifting, tilting off balance. "How old is she?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "She was born 5 days ago," Christopher said quietly. 5 days. My granddaughter had been alive for 5 days, and they had already given her away. I'd been on the other side of the world, crossing oceans to meet her, and now she was gone, out of my reach. "Why?" I asked, the words slipping from my lips. Vanessa straightened, her eyes cold. "She's deaf." The words hit me like a slap to the face. I couldn't breathe. I stared at her, waiting for the rest of the explanation that didn't come. She just stared back. The hospital had done a hearing test before discharge. She had failed it. They tested again, confirmed it. "She's deaf," I repeated slowly, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. "Yes," Vanessa replied with a touch of finality in her voice, "and we gave her away because she's deaf." "We're not equipped to handle a damaged child, Nancy," Christopher said, his voice tinged with something I couldn't name. "Be realistic. The specialists, the therapy, the time. My family wouldn't accept a defective grandchild in the family line." The word defective hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. My hands started to shake. I pressed them against my thighs, trying to steady myself. I didn't know what to say. How could they? I could only ask, "Tell me where she is, which agency. I'll adopt her myself." "You can't," Christopher said, standing up, his face hardening. "We already checked with lawyers. Grandparents don't have legal standing in adoption cases. The courts protect parental decisions. The records are sealed." They had made sure I had no rights, no way of finding my granddaughter. They had covered their tracks, knowing that I couldn't fight them, knowing that I would be powerless to do anything. "If you could throw away your own child," I said, my voice breaking, "then you're not the son I raised." His face hardened. "Then maybe you don't know me at all. You live in London, you visit once a year, you don't get to fly in and tell us how to run our lives." "Christopher," Vanessa said, reaching for him, but he pulled away. "It's done, Mom. She's gone. You need to accept that." I picked up the gift bag. The rattle inside shifted. It was the last thing I had to hold on to in that moment. "I'll never accept it," I said, my voice firm, as I walked out the door, my heart shattering into pieces. I drove away in a daze, the world outside the car window moving too fast, while everything inside me felt like it had stopped. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there, not with the hollow emptiness of their house, not with the sharp sting of their rejection echoing in my ears. The words they said were still bouncing around in my head. "She's deaf. We can't handle a damaged child. It's done." I could hear the chill in their voices, see the coldness in their eyes. They were looking at me like I was the one who didn't understand. But how could I? How could they? A 5-day-old baby, a granddaughter I had waited for, only to find out that she had been thrown away because she was deaf. I didn't know what I was feeling. Anger, betrayal, disbelief, maybe a little shame for not being able to stop them. I could have fought harder. I should have known something was wrong. I should have seen the signs, the subtle changes in their voices, their avoidance. I couldn't even look at my son the same way anymore. That child, my granddaughter, had been taken from me, from us, just because she was different, just because she couldn't hear. I needed to get away. I needed to think, to process. I found a Marriott off the highway and checked in, my body moving on autopilot, almost like I wasn't really there. The room was small, beige walls, a painting of a lighthouse on the wall. I dropped my bags on the bed and stood there for a moment, staring at the room that felt so foreign to me. I felt like a stranger in my own skin, like everything I knew had been turned upside down. And then I cried. I cried harder than I had in years. I cried for the baby I would never hold, for the daughter I would never get to meet. I cried for myself, for the person I had become, someone who had spent so many years working and focusing on the things that didn't matter, while my family fell apart. I cried until my head throbbed, until there was nothing left. And then I stopped. And I realized I couldn't just leave her out there, alone. I couldn't let her grow up thinking nobody wanted her, that she was nothing. She had a family. She had me. And I wasn't going to let her be forgotten. I took a deep breath and wiped my eyes. I was going to find her, no matter what. I wasn't going to stop until I did. I pulled out my laptop, my hands still trembling. I opened the lid, my fingers slow, like I wasn't sure if I could keep going, but I had to. I had to. I called Petra, my office manager in London. Petra, I need you to handle things remotely for a while. I'm staying in the States. How long? She asked, her voice soft with concern. I don't know yet. It'll take as long as it takes, I said. I'll let you know, but for now, handle things on your end. I hung up and immediately began searching for private investigators in Connecticut. I needed someone who could help me find her, someone who wasn't bound by the rules that kept me at arm's length. I didn't care how much it cost or how long it took. I had money and I had time, and I wasn't leaving Connecticut without my granddaughter. I found a private investigator with good reviews. I sent a consultation request and hoped for the best. Next, I searched for sign language classes. I didn't know how I would ever make up for lost time with her, but I knew one thing. I would communicate with her. I would learn her language so that when I finally found her, I could tell her that she wasn't alone, that she had always been wanted. I found a beginner American Sign Language course starting the following week at a library on West Putnam Avenue. Signed up and paid online. It was a small step, but it was a start. It was after midnight when I finally finished, changed into my pajamas and brushed my teeth. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, taking in the reflection of a 54-year-old woman, jet-lagged and swollen from crying, someone who looked nothing like the determined, put-together professional I had been just days ago. But I was going to be. I was going to find her. The next morning, I found a small apartment on Riverside Avenue and signed a year-long lease. I bought a map of Connecticut at a bookstore and pinned it to the bedroom wall and stuck a red pin in Greenwich, where my granddaughter had been born. I didn't know how long it would take or where I would end up going next, but this was where it started. I would find her. The sign language class met twice a week, Tuesday and Thursday evenings at the Greenwich Library. For the next 6 months, I practiced every chance I got. It was harder than I had imagined. My hands didn't cooperate. My fingers fumbled through the alphabet. I couldn't get the letters right, and I felt embarrassed every time I had to ask the teacher to demonstrate again. The instructor, Carol, was deaf, and she signed with fluid grace, her hands moving like water, smooth and quick. My hands felt stiff in comparison. But Carol was patient, and she kept reminding me that it was all about muscle memory. Practice, she signed. Every day. I practiced in the car. I practiced in the grocery store line. I practiced in bed before I fell asleep, even though my hands would cramp and the letters would blur. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. The private investigator I hired quit after 8 months. He told me the trail's too cold. The records are sealed too tight. I can't help you. I thanked him for his time, but I didn't give up. I hired another investigator, this time someone with more experience, and kept attending class twice a week. I learned the language slowly, painfully. Every time I made progress, it felt like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I kept going. I had no choice. The first year passed, and I could hold basic conversations. My grammar was wrong half the time, but I could ask questions, understand simple answers. It was a small victory. But my search for my granddaughter was still nowhere. I drove to every adoption agency I could find, showed them the few details I had. A baby girl, born in Greenwich, placed for adoption at 5 days old, deaf. Some agencies refused to even talk to me. Others listened, but nobody could help me. Privacy laws, sealed records, they couldn't give me anything. I went to orphanages in Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. I visited more than 200 facilities over the next few years. Nothing. 5 years into the search, I was exhausted. I was 59 years old, my body aching from all the driving, all the walking. My sign language was fluent now, but there were still moments when fast signers left me behind. But I wasn't going to stop, not until I found her. One afternoon, I sat in my car outside an orphanage in Albany, staring at the building. Another dead end. She'd be 5 years old now. Walking, talking, and whatever language she'd learned. Maybe she had found a family that loved her. Maybe she was happy. But I couldn't stop wondering. I wiped my face, wiped the tears that had already fallen. She deserved to know she was loved. I couldn't give up now. The phone rang 2 days later. A woman's voice came through the receiver. "Is this Nancy? The grandmother who's been looking for her granddaughter?" I sat up straight. This could be it. I could feel the pull of something in my chest. Hope, fear, anticipation. The woman continued, "I think I might know who you're looking for. There's a girl here, in Richmond, Virginia. She's been with us since she was an infant. She's deaf. She's 12 now." My heart stopped. My heart raced as I listened to the social worker's words. 12 years old. It felt like a lifetime, a world of waiting and searching that had led me here. It could be her. It had to be. "What's her name?" I asked, barely able to steady my voice. "We call her Ellen," the social worker said, "but that may not be her birth name. The records are sparse. She's been with us since she was 6 months old. She's deaf, and she's been passed over for adoption countless times." I didn't even know what to say. The room around me felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. This could be it. This could finally be her. I needed to see her. I needed to know if this was the granddaughter I had spent over a decade searching for. "I'm coming," I said, already grabbing my keys. "I can be there in 6 hours." "Please, just don't get your hopes up," the social worker warned gently. "I haven't told her you're coming. She's been passed over so many times, she's learned not to expect anything." But I was already in motion. I couldn't stop now. This was the lead I had been waiting for. I had driven over 200 miles to orphanages, adoption agencies, and deaf schools across the region. And now, here she was, waiting for me in a place I never thought I would find her. I drove through the night, stopping only for gas and coffee. My heart felt like it was pounding against my chest with every mile. Richmond, Virginia. Who would have thought that after everything, this would be where I would finally find her? I arrived just as the sun began to dip, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple. The orphanage sat on a quiet street, a converted Victorian house with a playground out back. The air was still, and I could almost hear my own heartbeat as I walked inside. Jennifer, the social worker, met me at the door. She was younger than I expected, her tired eyes betraying the weight of the years spent in this line of work. "She's outside," Jennifer said. "I haven't told her you're here yet. I didn't want to get her hopes up." We walked through the building, past bedrooms, a cafeteria, and a room full of donated toys. Finally, we made our way to the back door. The moment I stepped outside, I saw her. There, sitting alone on a bench by the fence, was a girl, small for her age, with dark hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. She was hunched over, her shoulders slumped, while the other kids around her played basketball and climbed on the jungle gym. She sat there, separate from them. "She does this," Jennifer said quietly, "keeps to herself. She's been passed over so many times, she's learned not to expect anything." But I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I stood there for a moment, just watching her. I had no idea what she would look like after all these years. The baby I had been waiting for was now 12. Would she even recognize me? Would she even want to meet me? I took a step forward. The girl didn't look up at first. Then, as if sensing me, she glanced up quickly before looking away. It was the look of someone who had learned to hide, to become invisible. I sat beside her on the bench. "Hello," I signed, my hands shaking a little. "My name is Nancy." Her eyes widened in surprise. No one had ever signed to her here before. She signed back slowly, unsure, her hands fumbling. "I'm Ellen," she said, her sign language basic and hesitant, like someone who had learned just enough to get by. I smiled, my heart swelling with emotion. She was real. She was here. She was mine. "Can I sit with you for a minute?" I asked, signing as I spoke. Ellen nodded, and for a moment we just sat there in silence, neither of us speaking. It was like the world had fallen away and there was just us, two people trying to understand each other. I noticed something then, a small birthmark on her left shoulder, barely visible beneath her t-shirt. It looked like a comma, and it hit me like a bolt of lightning. Christopher had the same birthmark in the same spot. I felt my breath catch in my throat. This was it. This was her. She was my granddaughter. I had found her. "Ellen," I said, my voice trembling, "can I ask you some questions about where you're from?" She shrugged, signing back. "I don't know much. I've been here since I was a baby." I felt a lump form in my throat. The timeline fit. The birthmark fit. Everything was falling into place. But there was more to know. "I need to go talk to someone inside, but I'll be right back. Will you wait for me?" She nodded, the same empty expression she had when I first saw her. It was like she had learned not to expect anything from anyone. I walked back into the orphanage, my legs shaking beneath me. I found Jennifer and asked to see Ellen's records. She pulled out a thin file. "Born in Connecticut, Placed for adoption at 4 days old through a private agency. Arrived here at 6 months when the temporary foster care fell through. Death confirmed, no family contact, no adoption interest. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was her. The girl I had searched for 12 long years. I need a DNA test, I said, my voice firm. I think she's my granddaughter. Jennifer's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and concern. Are you sure? She asked. I've been looking for 12 years. I need to know for certain. It took 3 days to arrange the DNA test. 3 days of waiting, 3 days of sitting with Ellen, signing to her, learning about her life, her world. I didn't tell her everything yet. I didn't want to overwhelm her, but I could see the spark in her eyes every time we signed, every time we communicated. The results came back on a Friday, and I was sitting in my lawyer's office in Greenwich when he opened the envelope. I had been holding my breath for days, weeks, years. 99.7% match. She's your biological granddaughter. I couldn't believe it. I felt my legs weak as the news sank in. After 12 years of searching, I had finally found her. The adoption process moved quickly this time. I had money, I had stability, and I had Ellen's caseworker's support. The orphanage backed the adoption. In less than 3 months, we were standing in a Virginia courthouse, and the judge was asking Ellen if she understood what was happening. Do you understand what's happening today? He asked, his voice gentle. Ellen signed, and the interpreter spoke. Yes, Envy's adopting me. I get to leave here. The judge looked at her with a soft smile. How do you feel about that? Ellen looked at me, then signed. Good. We flew to London the next week. Ellen sat by the window watching the clouds, her hands signing to me as I explained everything that was ahead of us. I promised her we would have a fresh start in London, that she would always be safe with me. Why did you look so long? She signed, looking at me with wide eyes. Because you're my granddaughter, I signed back, and I never stopped looking for you. Ellen leaned against my shoulder, her head heavy with emotion. We had been through so much, and now, finally, we were together. We arrived in London and Ellen had her own room in the flat, but it wasn't easy for her. She was hesitant, withdrawn at first. She barely looked at me, kept her eyes down, flinched when I moved too quickly. At dinner, she ate fast, like someone who expected her meal to be taken away at any moment. I had hired a consultant, Miriam, who helped me retrofit the flat to make it more accessible for Ellen. Visual doorbells, strobe lights for smoke alarms, better lighting for reading faces. The physical changes were easy enough to make, but the emotional ones were harder. Ellen's sign language was basic, and her education had been minimal. The orphanage had taught her just enough to get by. I didn't know how to fix that at first, but I was learning. I had learned so much already, and I knew it was just the beginning. I enrolled Ellen in a deaf school in North London. Therapy twice a week to help with the trauma of her adoption, to help her learn to trust again. At first, she didn't want to go, but over time, she began to make friends. Other deaf students tried to include her, but she was still hesitant, still afraid to trust. Her teacher pulled me aside one afternoon. She's struggling socially, the teacher said. The other students don't understand why she won't engage. I signed back, my hands shaking. She spent 12 years being rejected. She doesn't trust it yet. The teacher nodded. We'll keep trying. 6 months into our new life together, Ellen had a meltdown. She screamed. She threw her math textbook across the room. She was shaking, sobbing uncontrollably. I didn't know what to do. I sat on the floor next to her and signed. I'm here. I'm not leaving. You're safe." She collapsed into my arms, her whole body shaking as she cried. After everything, after 12 years of searching, of fighting, of never giving up, I had her, and I wasn't going to let anything tear us apart again. We were family now, real family, and nothing else mattered. Over the next few months, Ellen began to settle in. It wasn't easy, though. The trauma of her past still hung over her like a shadow, lingering in the way she avoided eye contact, in the way she hesitated before trusting anything or anyone. But she was changing, slowly, in her own time. I learned to be patient, to give her the space she needed, even when it broke my heart to watch her pull away. But there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when I saw a glimpse of the girl she could be. When she smiled at me without reservation. When she started singing along to a song on the radio, her hands moving in rhythm. When I'd catch her laughing with friends at school, her face lighting up like a star after a long, dark night. Still, there were days when it felt like we were moving backward instead of forward. Ellen would wake up early, her eyes wide and uncertain, always waiting for the next disappointment to come. She would stand in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection as though trying to figure out who she was in this new life, this new reality. But I knew that with time, things would get better. She was getting better, and we had all the time in the world. One afternoon, Ellen sat beside me on the couch. She had her hands folded in her lap, and I could see the sadness in her eyes, the same sadness she had carried with her for so long. We had never really talked about her past, about the orphanage, about the abandonment she had felt all those years. But now, as the days went on, I knew the questions were going to come. I knew the past was going to catch up with her. "Grandma," she signed, her fingers trembling slightly. "Why did they give me up? Why didn't they want me?" Her voice was soft, barely audible, as though she were testing the words before letting them out into the world. I took a deep breath, my heart aching for the girl sitting next to me. I signed back. "They were wrong, Ellen. They gave you away because they thought you were damaged. But that's not true. You're not damaged. You're strong, and you're loved, and you always have been." She looked down at her hands, her fingers moving slowly, as though she was trying to understand what I was saying. It was like she wanted to believe me, but she couldn't quite let go of the pain of those 12 years, 12 years of rejection, of being told that she wasn't enough. "I'm sorry," I signed softly. "I'm sorry that they couldn't see how special you are. But I see you. I always have." Her eyes filled with tears, and she buried her face in her hands, shaking with quiet sobs. I reached for her, pulling her into my arms, holding her tightly, knowing that this moment would be one of many. But I also knew that it was a moment of healing, a moment where, for the first time, Ellen might start to believe that she wasn't alone anymore, that she was wanted, that she was enough. The weeks turned to months, and slowly, Ellen began to trust me more. It wasn't just about the things I had bought for her, the new home we shared, the school I enrolled her in. It was about the love I had to give her, the unconditional, unshakable love that I had fought for, that I had searched for 12 years. It was about showing her that she mattered. And then, one day, it happened. She called me Mom. I wasn't expecting it. We were sitting in the kitchen, talking about her day at school. She was laughing about something that had happened in the cafeteria, and for the first time, her laugh sounded light, like a burden had been lifted. I was standing at the counter, pulling a tray of cookies from the oven, when she turned to me with that wide, trusting smile. "Thanks, Mom," she signed, the words flowing easily from her hands. I froze. My heart skipped a beat. "What did you just say?" I asked, my voice trembling with emotion. She looked up at me, her eyes soft and uncertain. "Thanks, Mom," she repeated, her hands moving gently. Tears filled my eyes. I didn't know if she understood what those words meant, but I knew they meant something significant, something that went beyond just the label. It meant she was beginning to accept what I had been trying to give her all along: a family, a place where she could belong, a place where she could feel safe. I pulled her into a tight hug, not caring if she felt awkward or unsure. I just wanted her to know, without any doubt, that she was loved. "You're welcome, sweet girl," I signed back, feeling the weight of the years we had spent apart and the joy of finally being together. The phone rang 2 weeks later. It was Christopher. It had been years since I had heard from him. Not a word, not even a text message. And yet here he was, calling me after all this time. I felt a strange sense of calm as I stared at the screen. I had to pick it up. I couldn't ignore it forever. "Hello?" I answered, my voice steady despite the way my heart was pounding in my chest. "Mom?" Christopher's voice sounded small on the other end of the line. "I know we haven't spoken in years. I know what happened was unforgivable. But I need to tell you something." I didn't know how to respond. The words felt heavy in my mouth, the years of anger and pain still lingering like smoke in my lungs. He continued, "I've thought about you every day. I've thought about what happened, about Ellen, about everything. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect anything from you. But I need to tell you something. Vanessa and I adopted a son. His name is Gabriel. He's 18 now. A good kid. Better than I deserve. He's starting college, and he asked about you. He asked if he had a grandmother." I felt my breath catch. He had a son, another child. After everything, after abandoning Ellen. He went on. "I told him yes, that we had a falling out. He wants to meet you. I know I have no right to ask, but he deserves to know you. If you're willing, if you want to meet him, I'll make it happen." I stared at the phone in my hand, feeling my world tilt again. This was the moment I had dreaded, the moment I knew would come. I wasn't sure what to think, what to feel. I hadn't seen or heard from my son in 16 years, and now here he was, asking for forgiveness, asking for a chance to make things right. And then there was Gabriel, the son they had kept, the child they had chosen. I wasn't sure if I could do it. I wasn't sure if I could face them again after everything they had done. But then I thought about Ellen, about how far we had come, about the family we had built from the ashes of rejection. And I knew that I couldn't ignore the possibility of another chance. "Okay," I said, my voice quiet but resolute. "I'll meet him." The next week, Ellen and I flew to Connecticut. It was surreal returning to the place that once was my home, to the place where everything went wrong. But this time, I wasn't alone. I had Ellen by my side. When we arrived, it felt like everything had changed, and yet nothing had. Christopher and Vanessa had moved into a smaller house, one that looked humble compared to the grand home they had once lived in. And Gabriel, he was different from the family I remembered. He wasn't like them. He was kind, genuine, and his eyes were filled with curiosity and empathy. He didn't look like the person I expected, but maybe that was the point. He had been raised by people who didn't understand, by people who didn't value what truly mattered. And now he was here asking for something he hadn't even known he needed. The next day, Gabriel came over alone. It was just him this time, no parents in sight, and it felt different. He sat down beside me, looking a little nervous but mostly eager. We spoke about everything, about the time that had passed, about the life we had built, and then he asked about Ellen. "How's she doing?" he asked quietly. "She's good," I said, my voice softening. "She's been through a lot, but she's strong. She's thriving." Gabriel smiled, and for the first time, I saw the sincerity in his eyes. He really wanted to understand. A few months later, Gabriel had become a regular part of our lives. Ellen had taken to him, and he had taken to her. They spent hours together, learning from one another. Gabriel's sign language improved, and Ellen started talking about things she had kept locked inside for years. And in all that time, I learned one thing. Family isn't just about blood. It's about love, about choosing each other, about being there when it matters most. One evening, as we sat together at the dinner table, I looked at my two grandchildren, Ellen with her bright eyes and confident smile, and Gabriel, who had found a place with us in a way I never expected. "Do you ever think about where we started?" I asked, my hands resting on the table. Gabriel smiled softly. "Yeah," he said, his voice low. "But we've come a long way, and it feels like home now." Ellen nodded, her hands moving in fluid signs. "This is my family now, and that's all that matters." I looked at both of them, my heart full. "And I'm never letting you go," I signed back. We may have started broken, but we were whole now, and nothing was ever going to change that. As the months passed, things began to feel more settled. We settled into a routine, though it was far from perfect. Ellen continued her education, thriving in her new school, while Gabriel adjusted to his new life in London. The bond between them grew deeper every day, and even I, who had watched this transformation from the sidelines, could see the changes. Ellen became more confident, more willing to share her thoughts and feelings. And Gabriel, the quiet young man who had come into our lives under such strange and painful circumstances, was finding his place in the world. Still, there were moments when the scars of their past would surface. Ellen would have nightmares sometimes, waking up in a cold sweat, her heart racing. She'd run to me, not even needing to say a word. I'd wrap my arms around her, holding her tightly, letting her know that she was safe, that she was home now. Those moments were hard, but they were also healing for both of us. Because in those moments, I saw the trust that had grown between us, the trust that had taken years to build, piece by piece. And then there were the questions from Gabriel, questions that kept coming, questions I hadn't been prepared for. It was the things he hadn't understood, things he'd only begun to realize after he found out about Ellen's adoption and the story behind it. One afternoon, after we just finished dinner, Gabriel looked at me, his expression serious, his eyes searching for answers. "Why did they really give her up?" he signed to me, his hand slow but deliberate. I looked at him, surprised by the weight in the question. I had known this would come. I had known that eventually the truth about Ellen's past would come out. But somehow, hearing Gabriel ask it hit me harder than I expected. I took a deep breath and signed back, the words feeling heavy in my hands. "Because she's deaf," I signed. because they thought that made her less. They didn't want her. Gabriel's face softened as he processed my words. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the anger, the pain. But they kept me, he signed, his hands trembling just a little. They kept me, and I was perfect, at least in their eyes. I nodded slowly, the weight of his words sitting heavy in the air. I didn't know how to explain it to him, not without it hurting him. But he deserved to know. He deserved to understand what had really happened, what kind of people his parents had been and still are. It's not your fault, Gabriel, I signed gently. It's not. But the truth is, they didn't want her. They chose you because they thought you'd fit their image. They never saw her for who she really was, for the beautiful, strong girl she is. Gabriel's hands paused midair, his eyes filling with sadness. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the anger, the pain. I can't believe they did that, he signed. I can't believe they just threw her away. I sat there for a moment, unsure of what to say. I had been the one searching for Ellen all these years. I had been the one who had fought for her, learned her language, spent my time chasing down leads, knowing deep down that she was out there somewhere, waiting to be found. But to hear Gabriel, her brother, who had been kept, raised, loved, say the words I had feared for so long, it was both devastating and validating. They did. I signed back, my hands slow and deliberate. But we found her, and she's home now. The next few weeks felt like a blur. Gabriel spent more time with Ellen, trying to teach her sign language, struggling through the confusion of mixed-up signs and incorrect grammar. Ellen, for her part, was patient, but I could see the frustration building. She wanted to communicate better, to be understood fully by Gabriel. But there was still a gap between them, a gap that had come from years of separation. But they were working on it together, each day a little better than the last. And every time I saw them laughing together, playing games, signing to each other, I couldn't help but think that despite everything that had happened, this was what family looked like. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and it was ours. A few months later, as the days grew colder and the holiday season approached, I found myself sitting in the kitchen, the familiar hum of the Christmas lights in the background. I watched Ellen and Gabriel as they worked together to decorate the tree. Gabriel was struggling to put the star on top, but Ellen had already figured out the best way to do it. I watched her help him, guiding his hands, showing him how to do it just right. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Gabriel signed with a smile, looking at Ellen with admiration. Ellen grinned, her hands moving quickly as she explained how to balance the star on top. "Lots of times. Mom always lets me do it," she signed back. I chuckled softly, feeling a sense of warmth spread through me. They were becoming a team, a real team. And in that moment, I realized just how much they had both changed. The walls they had built around themselves, the walls of pain, of rejection, were slowly crumbling. In their place, a new bond had formed, a bond of love, of understanding, of family. As the evening wore on, we sat together at the dinner table, a quiet, peaceful dinner that felt like the most normal thing in the world. The laughter, the conversation, the occasional silence, it all felt right. It felt like home. Ellen looked at me, her hands moving quickly as she signed, "Thank you, Mom, for everything." My heart swelled with emotion. and I couldn't help but smile. "You're welcome, sweet girl. You're home now. You've always been home." It wasn't just the holidays that made everything feel complete. It was the quiet moments, the small victories, the tender moments of connection that told me that we had made it. We all had made it. But that night, after the dishes were washed and the lights were dimmed, I sat by the window and thought about the years that had passed. I thought about the pain, the rejection, the struggles. But I also thought about the love that had grown despite it all, the love that had been there all along, just waiting for us to find it. And I thought about Christopher. I thought about the son I had raised, the man he had become, and the man he had chosen to be. The choices he had made, the mistakes he had lived with, and the way he had tried to reach out after all these years. But despite everything, I knew that the past would always be the past. Some things could never be undone. The phone rang again the next morning. It was Christopher. He said, "I'm sorry. I know I can't make up for what happened. I know I've hurt you, hurt Ellen, but I need you to know I regret it every day, and I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just want you to know I'm sorry for everything." I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what to say to him, not after everything that had happened. But I knew that forgiveness was not something I was ready to give yet. Not to him, not to Vanessa. "I'm sorry too," I said quietly. "But this is the family I've built. This is the family I'm choosing now." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Christopher spoke again. "I understand. Take care, Mom." And then he hung up. The next few days passed in a quiet haze. Gabriel continued to grow more comfortable in his new life, making new friends, settling into London. He was enrolled in University College London, studying social work. Fitting, I thought, for the young man who had been forced into a role of caretaker, of witness for so many years. And Ellen was continuing her studies as well, attending a deaf school where she was thriving, making her own way. The holidays came and went, and with them, a sense of peace settled over us. It wasn't the peace I had imagined. This wasn't a picture-perfect family reunion, with everyone smiling and happy all the time. There were still hard days, still moments when the past reared its ugly head. But it didn't matter, because we had each other. And as we sat around the dinner table that night, eating the meal we had prepared together, I knew one thing. We were family, and that was everything. As the months passed, I saw my family transform in ways I never imagined. Ellen became more confident, her voice growing stronger, and Gabriel found his place in a world that had once seemed distant. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. Our story wasn't one of perfection, but of persistence, of love found in unexpected places. I would never forget the pain of the past, the years of searching, of rejection, and of loss. But I knew now that it was the love we had fought for, the bond we had rebuilt, that truly mattered. This was the family I had created, a family of resilience, a family of choice. The last time I spoke with Christopher, it was brief. He apologized again, and while I couldn't give him forgiveness just yet, I knew he had to live with his choices. We all had to live with the choices we made. The past was behind us, but the future was still unwritten. Now, with my grandchildren by my side, I look forward to whatever comes next. Every day is a gift, and with them, I know we can face anything. This is my story, one of searching, of fighting, of never giving up. And I hope it reminds you that no matter how difficult the journey, family can always be rebuilt, love can always find its way, and no one is ever too lost to be found.